StarCitizen has had VR support for almost 3 months now, and it keeps getting better. This video will cover a handful of different topics, but I'll start with the most important one. Long story short, I made my first StarCitizen VR steps with my own Quest 3 headset, and then Pimax reached out and sent me a much more advanced Crystal Super headset, which means this video is partially sponsored, but I'll get to that later. Unfortunately, I had a pretty bad start with the headset and was not sure how to make a video about it, because it actually looked and performed way worse than my Quest 3, because I do not have a high-end 40 or 5090 GPU. I was talking to Space Tomato, who had a very similar experience. However, just this weekend, Sylvan announced that StarCitizen now works with Pimax OpenXR, which, quote, could improve performance. In my case, however, the improvement was quite drastic. Before, I had either such a low resolution that it looked terrible even compared to my Quest 3, or if I made the slightest increase in visual settings, performance would completely tank to under 1 frame per second. Now with the update, I get solid 30 FPS in Levski at native headset resolution on a 5070 Ti, so if you already had a Pimax headset and had a similar first experience, maybe give it another try now. First of all, you now have to enable VR from the launcher. Unfortunately, every time there is a new patch. And then in your Pimax software, enable Pimax OpenXR instead of using Steam VR. Okay, and that was my public service announcement part of the video. From here, I want to correct some mistakes from my first video, then talk a bit more about the experience I had since the first implementation, and talk a bit about the different headsets I have used. Let's start with corrections. In the first video I said that everything felt weirdly small to me. Specifically, people and ships felt smallish. And I did not know, but that was just an incorrectly set IPD. IPD is the interpupillary distance, so the distance between your pupils. All the headsets I have used have hardware dials for the IPD adjustments, and so I thought setting that correct is all you have to do, but apparently you also have to set the IPD on the software side, which so far I never had to do in any of the games I played. Lucky, I guess. For StarCitizen though, go to the VR settings, IPD adjustments, and set that to the right distance of your eyes. If you have glasses, you will find that number on your last eye exam. If you don't, you can measure it with a ruler in front of a mirror, I guess. Or if you don't have the time, just go by feel, look at something you know from real life. I always recommend people or heads, because as humans we have a very good feel for what size that should be. And then just adjust that IPD for it to feel natural and right to you. I would measure it, though a wrong IPD can also lead to motion sickness or just blurry vision. Second correction was not really a mistake. I said that first-person shooting feels pretty terrible in StarCitizen VR and that I could not recommend playing these gameplay section at all. However, I believe on the day my original video came out, a small hotfix changed a few things, including that right-clicking to aim your gun will snap the gun in front of your current head position. Before that, the gun would just lock on in relation to wherever your body was, and that could mean that you would have to move your head into a super weird angle to get behind the scope. That really was pretty unplayable. The setting existed before, but it was made the default in that quick fix, and now it's pretty decent. I would still argue that playing first-person shooters in VR with mouse and keyboard is and never will be optimal, but apparently some people prefer that over motion control. At the end of the day, it might be a preference thing, but I would definitely call the controls playable and decent now, and I had some fun with it. What else have I been up to after the first impressions? The main attraction is arguably flying. That is just amazing in VR. But I wanted to try some of the calm stuff that I think can really shine in VR too. I tried a lot of cargo loading in the current event, but mostly mining and salvaging. The gameplay loops where you just sit and relax and look at the environment for a long time. I think here the VR, while not as flashy, really shines, because it again gives you a much better feel for the whole scale of everything, and it shows you all these environments from really new perspectives. I don't think I can recommend this specifically to new players as first impressions, because there are so many shortcuts you need to know. It does not matter if you use mouse and keyboard or a nice HOTAS, finding these blindly in VR can be a bit of a nightmare. However, if you already have some experience and you know what you're doing, this will obviously elevate that experience and make it a lot more immersive and nice. I think the best case scenario that I had with new content, like in my case the new Argo Moth, is playing with a friend who plays on a flat screen and is very efficient in what he's doing, while I can sit in my turret and do the relaxing manual work, enjoy the scenery and simply get to experience the new features. Now let's talk headsets. As I said in the beginning, I started with a Quest 3 headsets that I owned for a couple of years now, but Pimax sent me a Crystal Super to make content about it. That means this is sponsored, but I'm not directly paid. I have to return the headset and they did not give me any instructions on what I would have to talk about. In fact, I'm not even really going to compare these two headsets today. I would love to make a comprehensive comparison, because after all I agreed to this partnership because I wanted to find out which is the best headset for both StarCitizen but also for me, who plays other VR titles too. But as I said in the beginning, Pimax and StarCitizen just started to work properly together, so if I ever do such a comparison I would need more experience with these. All I can say for now is the much higher resolution of the Pimax Crystal as well as the slightly higher FOV of my 50 ppd model are both things StarCitizen specifically really benefits from. I mentioned in my first video, if you design a game for VR, you don't necessarily need the highest resolution. Let's take Half-Life Alyx as an example, which is already quite a few years old. The base pistol has these LED indicators for remaining ammunitions on the side. This may look almost like a toy if you just see it in a video, but in VR you can read it really naturally. No matter the light or distance, it's a gameplay first design. In StarCitizen, however, things look cool, and small numbers on guns look way more serious and realistic, but they are also harder to read, especially if you play in VR with a resolution lower than your average PC monitor. So that is my first takeaway. With texts and menus everywhere and super high resolution textures available if you have the hardware to run them, StarCitizen benefits from a high-resolution VR headset like maybe no other current game. However, another big topic is performance. Most questions under my first videos were about what kind of PC you need to play this. And it does not necessarily need to be crazy. The official developer's comment was, quote, "If your PC can run StarCitizen, it can run it in VR. The overhead is not as bad as you might think." However, that means if you run it at a somewhat comparable resolution. I normally play StarCitizen on this resolution, while the Quest 3 has about 2K per eye, so about 5 million pixels on my screen versus 9 million on my headset. So performance is worse on the headset, but the two are not completely out of relation. It runs decently. The Pimax Crystal Super, however, has a resolution of over 29 million pixels. Even more actually, because it needs to render quite an overhead to achieve the higher field of view distortion. So even though it runs okay for me now on my 5070 Ti, technically I need a stronger PC, and I can't stress enough that this is a high-end headset that requires high-end hardware. Pimax recommends a 4090 or 5090. They told me before, but I said I wanted to try it anyways. If you have that kind of hardware and you already know you want a high-end headset, I do have a code for Pimax headsets, which gives me a provision, and they have a nice policy where you can get your money back if you don't like it or does not work as intended, but I have to stress that this does not make sense for everyone. It's an expensive product for high-end gamers. And I want to stress another point. In my first video I said StarCitizen VR is new and everyone is talking about it. But don't let the FOMO get to you. You can enjoy this game without spending another $500 on hardware. Or you can wait a bit. VR is only going to get better over time in its implementation in this game. Now I want to say the same about upgrading. Yes, the higher resolution is great, and yes, the higher field of view is great. It is next level for me in many ways, but it's not like I can never use my Quest 3 headset again now. The jump from flat screen gaming to VR is truly special. I said you experience everything like for the first time, like it's real, but I would personally say the jump from low-end VR to high-end VR is not as big. Don't get me wrong, I have played VR for many years now and I am thrilled about what this headset can do, But if you have never experienced VR, you don't need to start at the top end to get to feel what makes VR special. Will this make me a lot of money in headset sale commissions? Probably not. That's okay. But I'm still very excited about StarCitizen's VR functionality, and I'm curious where it's going with motion controls and what else. If you haven't heard, Squadron 42 will also launch with VR support, which is kinda crazy, but that easily deserves its own video. That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the verse.